Divorce is your problem. You'll still be sending the $8,000 for this month's living expenses as always. The shameless voice of my former mother-in-law crackled through the phone. For the last 5 years, I had suppressed my entire being at the sound of that voice, but not anymore. I replied with a smirk. Eleanor, did you know your precious son just inherited a $40 million debt? I thought that single sentence would end it. But it was merely the beginning of my triumphant revenge. Please watch until the end to see how this shameless family brought about their own ruin. Divorce is divorce. You still owe me the $8,000 a month you've always sent. My ex-mother-in-law. Eleanor's shrill voice echoed with arrogance. Instead of gritting my teeth and enduring it as I had for the past 5 years, I let the corners of my mouth lift into a smile and answered calmly. Eleanor, I don't know if you're aware, but your golden boy personally signed an agreement to take full responsibility for the $40 million debt you racked up from your scams. That afternoon, a cold sleet carrying the last dregs of winter scattered across the New York City sky. A frigid wind seeped through the cracks of my tiny studio apartment, less than 300 square feet, tucked deep in a narrow alley in Queens. I sank to the worn linoleum floor and stared blankly at the 3 cardboard boxes that contained my entire net worth after 5 years of marriage. 5 years of my youth, the prime of my life as a woman, and the time I spent pinching every penny. In the end, all I had to show for it were a few worn-out clothes and a heart so scarred it felt beyond healing. This studio, though small, cramped, and lacking in every way, was a true paradise to me now. Here there was freedom. There were no more barbed comments from morning till night, no sharp eyes monitoring every bite I took, and most of all, no more feeling of being exploited physically and mentally down to the very last drop. I carefully unpacked my clothes, organizing them into a cheap plastic dresser I'd bought at a discount store. Every small act of arranging my new life felt strangely liberating. As I was wiping down a small desk to use as my workspace, the piercing ring of my phone shattered the silence. The name Eleanor Vance on the screen brought an involuntary bitter smile to my face. Habit is a terrifying thing. The divorce had been finalized in court just yesterday, yet here she was, calling at the exact same time, like a well-oiled machine demanding its due. I swiped to answer and held the phone to my ear, preparing for the familiar drama to begin. Before I could even say hello, Eleanor's sharp, haughty voice erupted. Emma, it's the 10th. What's going on with my living expenses? Don't tell me you're trying to stiff me. Just because you had a fight with Daniel and left home, don't think you can weasel your way out of your obligations. Wire me the $8,000 right now. I have a spa appointment with my friends this afternoon. Get it done. Don't make me call your parents back in Ohio and embarrass them. For the past 5 years, that domineering voice had turned my meals and my sleep into nightmares. Every month, whether I was sick in the hospital or my salary was cut due to a tough project at work, the call would come on the 10th demanding money. It started at $3,000, supposedly to help with groceries. Then it jumped to $5,000 with the excuse of inflation. Finally, she unilaterally declared it her personal allowance and raised it to $8,000. My hard-earned salary, born of blood, sweat, and tears, flowed directly into her pockets without fail. With that money, she bought expensive imported supplements, went to weekly aesthetic treatments, and purchased high-end clothes to wear to her charity luncheons. Meanwhile, I, the one earning the money, had to time my grocery shopping to catch the end-of-day sales on vegetables and rotate through a few threadbare business suits. Despite this extreme sacrifice, my husband Daniel saw my devotion to his family as a matter of course. He considered it the natural duty of a wife from a modest background. I took a deep breath, and in the calmest, most detached voice I could muster, I replied, Mrs. Vance, perhaps your memory is failing you in your old age, or maybe your son has been too busy to share some very important news. Yesterday morning at the Queens County Family Court, my divorce from Daniel Vance was officially finalized. As of this moment, I am no longer your daughter-in-law, and I have no relationship or obligation to you or your family. As for that $8,000, I suggest you contact your son directly. Eleanor shrieked into the phone, her voice betraying extreme fury. What are you talking about? Is this how you repay kindness? Daniel is a marketing director. Do you know how much he's done for you? And now you're just going to run away because the family is going through a little rough patch? I don't know anything about courts. As long as you were this family's daughter-in-law, you have a responsibility to share our burdens. Don't even think about escaping. I burst out laughing. It was a bitter, liberating, and incredibly light laugh. The day had finally come when I could stand up to this absurdity. Eleanor, you're deeply mistaken. For the last 5 years, this family has lived off the salary I earned working day and night as a graphic designer. I bought your precious health supplements and everything else. And as for your family's little problem, it seems you haven't heard about the surprise gift your son has for you. Eleanor fell silent for a moment. Her ragged breathing betrayed her confusion. What do you mean? What gift? Stop talking in circles. I enunciated each word clearly, making sure she wouldn't miss a single syllable. You remember that massive $40 million debt you created, don't you? The $20 million you sank into that fraudulent investment scheme after secretly taking out a second mortgage on the house, and the $15 million you borrowed from loan sharks to buy your daughter Jessica. That condo, not to mention all the money you co-signed for your gambling-addicted relatives. You hid it from me from everyone, but you can't hide the black ink on the collection notices. I paused, feeling the dead silence on the other end, then delivered the final blow. In his haste to kick me out with nothing, his desperation to officially be with his mistress Amber Lynn, and above all his greed to protect the joint assets he'd secretly siphoned off to her, Daniel Vance made a grave mistake. Thinking he was so clever, he didn't even bother to read the divorce settlement agreement my lawyer, Mr. Miller, drafted. There was a very clear clause in it. Daniel Vance voluntarily agrees to retain all assets registered in his name, and in exchange he will assume full responsibility for the repayment of the personal debt of $40 million incurred by his mother, Eleanor Vance. He happily signed, and initialed it right there in front of the judge. The space between us felt frozen. Only Eleanor's ragged, irregular gasps came through the phone. The sound of a glass shattering on the other end signaled the onset of a full-blown panic attack. You scheming witch. You trapped my son. You think Daniel is stupid enough to sign some debt-trap document. You're framing my family. In a voice devoid of emotion, I calmly replied, "It's an official divorce decree signed by both parties and stamped with the court's seal. If you don't believe me, feel free to call your brilliant marketing director's son and ask him yourself. I hope you all have a joyful, happy, and harmonious life with that $40 million debt. And please have some self-respect and never call to interfere in my life again. Goodbye." I decisively ended the call and added Eleanor's number to my permanent block list. A weight of 1,000 tons lifted from my shoulders. My life was truly turning a new page today. I made myself a cup of warm tea and sat by the window watching the evening rain fall over the city. Just as the rain washed the dust from the old rooftops, I had just washed away the filth of my miserable marriage. A bigger storm was coming now that they knew the truth, but I was ready to fight for my life. Before the tea in my hand had even cooled, my phone screen lit up repeatedly with an unfamiliar number. I knew who it was, but I calmly took another sip of tea before answering. It was just as I expected. As soon as the call connected, a torrent of curses assaulted my ear. "You venomous snake, how dare you set me up? You hired that lawyer to trick me into signing that goddamn agreement, didn't you? Get back to the courthouse right now and void that document." It was Daniel. His voice, usually so composed and polished in his role as a director, was now completely broken with terror and rage. His mother must have just finished her screaming, crying fit, relayed the terrible news, and he had scrambled to reread the divorce papers, finally understanding the situation. I held the phone slightly away from my ear, waited for his shouting to subside, and then spoke coldly. "Daniel, I never trapped you. I didn't hold a knife to your throat and force you to sign. That agreement was printed in plain English in a large font and sat right in front of you during the entire final mediation. The judge even asked you multiple times if you agreed to the asset and debt division clause. You said, 'I agree,' with your own mouth in front of our legal representatives." Daniel stammered, his anger palpable between ragged breaths. "You were rushing me. You brought your lawyer and confused me with all that legal nonsense. You knew my mom was in debt, and you deliberately pinned it all on me. You viper." I let out a sharp laugh, ruthlessly exposing the pathetic man's true nature. "Stop playing the victim, Daniel. The reason you didn't read the agreement carefully wasn't because I rushed you. It was because you were desperate to end this marriage quickly to protect the joint assets you secretly funneled away for that little mistress of yours, Amber Lynn, for the car and designer bags you bought her. You were terrified that if you delayed, I would request a full audit of our joint accounts and legally claim my half. You wanted to kick me out with nothing and move her into our home. Your meticulous, greedy calculations finally backfired on you. Karma comes faster than you think, Daniel." Silence descended on the other end. Faced with the naked truth I had stripped bare, Daniel had no defense. He and his mistress had meticulously planned to leave me penniless, but he had forgotten one key factor: his own mother's insatiable greed and recklessness. The colossal debt Eleanor created was the fatal knife in his back, and I had simply guided his hand to take the responsibility that he, as a dutiful son, rightfully deserved. Daniel's tone shifted a mixture of pleading and weak threats. Emma, we were married for 5 years. You can't be this heartless. 40 million is an insane amount of money. Where am I supposed to get that? The loan sharks will kill my whole family. You have an emergency fund, right? Help me out with that. If you don't, I'll tell everyone everything. I'll make it so you can never show your face in this city again. I sighed. The thought process of a chronic narcissist was both pathetic and laughable. My emergency fund was drained dry years ago by your mother's monthly $8,000 withdrawals. What right do you have to ask me for help? The person you live with now is Amber Lynn. The person spending your money is Amber Lynn. Go tell your pretty little mistress to sell her car and designer bags to pay off her future mother-in-law's debt. And as for your threats, go ahead. From this point on, any harassment from you will be immediately reported to the police. Don't ever call me from this number again. You make me sick. I ended the call and blocked Daniel's new number without hesitation. The old house, my ex-in-laws, they were all just a pile of trash I had left behind. I opened my banking app. The number on the screen was exactly $80,000. This was the paltry sum Daniel had tossed my way as alimony to get rid of me quickly. A mere $80,000 for 5 years of my youth and exploited labor. But it was fine. To me right now, freedom was worth more than billions. I took out a small notebook and meticulously planned my future expenses. 6 months' rent, $18,000. Food and living expenses, while I looked for a new job, about $15,000. The rest had to be an emergency fund to be guarded fiercely and never wasted. Looking at my pale, gaunt face in the dresser mirror, I vowed to be strong. I opened my laptop, updated my resume, and organized my design projects into a professional portfolio. The Vance family's tragedy was just beginning, but my path back to the light was just opening up. The next morning, I woke up early and made myself a simple bowl of instant ramen with some leftover spinach. I couldn't remember the last time I had slept so soundly without nightmares or Eleanor's nagging about breakfast. The studio was small, but it was filled with the morning sunlight pouring through the window. As I ate and scrolled through job postings, my phone rang. This time it was my ex-sister-in-law, Jessica. After a moment's hesitation, I decided to answer. I knew this family wouldn't let me go easily. It was better to confront them one by one and make them give up completely. Hello, Jessica's voice was laced with a fake theatrical sob, a stark contrast to her usual arrogant demeanor of treating me like a maid. Today, she sounded unnaturally desperate and tragic. Emma, something terrible has happened at home. Mom's been bedridden since yesterday. Her blood pressure is so high the doctor had to make a house call to give her an IV drip. And loan sharks have been showing up at my brother's office threatening to break his legs. Emma, she pleaded, we were family for 5 years. You can't just stand by and watch people die, can you? I calmly took a bite of my noodles and replied slowly, Jessica, let me remind you again, your brother and I are legally divorced. Whether your family is in debt, sick, or being threatened by the mob, it's no longer my responsibility. And as for our 5 years of family ties, you should have reminded your brother of those ties when he was cheating on me and trying to kick me out to move another woman in. My sharp words left Jessica speechless for a moment, but having been spoiled her whole life, shamelessness was second nature to her. She quickly reverted to her tactic of moralizing and tearful begging. How can you say that? Don't you have a heart? Don't you know Mom only got into debt because she was worried about the family? My brother is broke now. I know you have a secret stash of a few $100,000. Please lend it to us to pay off the loan sharks first. We'll sell our parents' old house in the country and pay you back with interest. You can't be so heartless. Rage boiled inside me, but I instantly suppressed it, channeling it into biting sarcasm. In front of this family of vampires, I couldn't show weakness for even a second. Jessica, it's funny you talk about having a heart. You want me to use my savings to bail out your family. Take a look at yourself in the mirror. That Dior bag you carry to brunch every weekend, how much did that cost? Those Chanel shoes on your feet are worth several months of my salary. And that luxury condo you live in, who do you think paid for that? Your mother. She exploited my labor and mortgaged her house to gift you that lavish lifestyle. You all lived high on my dime, and now that you're bankrupt, you want me to take the fall. Do you think I'm an idiot? Jessica's voice stammered in panic. Emma, that's ridiculous. My boyfriend bought me those things, and Mom bought the condo so I wouldn't have to struggle after I got married. Don't try to pin this on me. I spoke with force, hammering each word into her self-centered brain. Wherever that money came from, your mother and brother are now saddled with a $40 million debt. As the daughter who directly benefited from that debt, don't think you can just play the innocent princess and walk away. I'm warning you, Daniel can barely save himself right now. It won't be long before the creditors come knocking on the door of your luxury condo to collect on the money your mother borrowed. If you truly care about them, sell your designer bags, your designer shoes, and that condo to save your mother and brother. Don't ever call me again. I don't have a single penny for your shameless family. I hung up, immediately deleted her number, and blocked all her social media accounts. The ramen on the table was cold, but strangely, I had an appetite. Faced with the core issue of money, the family's masks were peeling off one by one. I knew my warning would give Jessica sleepless nights. Accustomed to luxury and selfishness, she would never sell her assets to save her mother or brother. Under the pressure of money, their family would start tearing each other apart. All I had to do was watch from a distance and protect my new life. In the afternoon, as I was designing some sample logos for my portfolio, messages from old friends and former colleagues started pouring in. My phone, though on silent, buzzed incessantly. Frowning, I opened my messaging app to see what was going on. A college friend had sent a screenshot of a social media post with a worried message. "Emma, you need to get online now. Daniel is trashing you all over social media. He's trying to humiliate you. He even tagged all our mutual friends." My heart sank. I quickly checked my social media. Sure enough, my eyes fell on a long post by Daniel, which had already garnered hundreds of likes and comments in just 2 hours. In the post, Daniel portrayed himself as a devoted husband who had been betrayed and scammed by his wife. He painted me as a vicious, money-grubbing woman, using every pathetic word he could muster. He lied that I had been siphoning off assets to my own family, and that as soon as his family's business ran into trouble and his mother got sick, I had set a trap to dump the debt on him and run away. In the comments, scores of people who didn't know the truth were spewing vile insults at me. They called me an ungrateful backstabber and advised Daniel to report me to the police and have me thrown in jail. Reading that deceitful post, a furious anger surged through me. I clenched my phone so tightly my knuckles turned white. Daniel was trying to back me into a corner. He wanted to use public pressure to make it impossible for me to even hold my head up in society. But he was mistaken. The Emma of today was not the submissive, long-suffering woman of last year. I took a deep breath, telling myself to stay calm. When fighting with despicable people, crying or cursing solves nothing. Cold, hard evidence was the most powerful weapon. I opened a drawer and took out an external hard drive where I had secretly stored everything for the past few months, ever since I first suspected Daniel's affair. I opened a folder named Evidence and carefully selected the clearest files. First were the screenshots of bank transfers from my account to Eleanor's. Transfers of $5,000 to $8,000 payments for hospital bills, utility bills. Over 5 years, it totaled nearly $600,000. Every transaction was clearly dated. Next were screenshots of Eleanor's shameless texts demanding money and threatening to ruin my parents' reputation back home if I didn't send it. And finally, the kill shot. I uploaded a screen recording that included audio. It was from a night I had secretly recorded a conversation with Daniel when I confronted him about his mother's debt. In the recording, Daniel's voice was crystal clear. He admitted that his mother was involved in a fraudulent investment scheme and that he had deliberately hidden the truth to protect his mistress Amber's assets and shift the debt onto me. I compiled all this evidence into a single post. I didn't write a long defensive essay like Daniel. I threw a single short, decisive, and direct paragraph at him and at everyone interested in this story. The truth cannot be hidden by cheap lies. During my 5 years of marriage, I supported my mother-in-law with nearly $600,000 of my own hard-earned money. The bank records are attached as proof. The reason for my divorce was the discovery of my husband's infidelity and a conspiracy to transfer his mother's $40 million debt incurred from a fraudulent scheme onto me while hiding assets. The divorce agreement was signed voluntarily by Daniel Vance to protect his mistress. All text messages and audio recordings are posted here as evidence. Daniel Vance, cease and desist your defamatory actions immediately. If this continues, I will submit all this evidence to the authorities to fully expose your family's conspiracy to commit forgery and fraud. I tagged Daniel and every mutual friend who had commented on his post. My finger decisively hit post. Within 15 minutes, the tide on social media had turned dramatically. My post with its irrefutable evidence was like a bomb dropped into a calm lake. Acquaintances started sharing the audio file. The comments insulting me vanished in an instant, replaced by a wave of fury directed at Daniel and his family. People condemned the despicable behavior of a cheating husband and the insatiable greed of a mother-in-law. My phone was flooded with apology messages from friends who had misunderstood. Terrified by my post, Daniel quickly set his social media accounts to private to escape the public flogging. My perfect counterattack had completely shattered my ex-husband's vile scheme. I smiled and closed my laptop. The social media storm was no longer my concern. I took out my only decent suit and carefully ironed it. Tomorrow I had an interview for a design team lead position at a major media company. Leaving the ruins of my former in-laws behind, I was focusing all my energy on rebuilding my career and my bright future. The interview went better than I could have hoped. My extensive practical experience and the newfound confidence I gained after shedding the shackles of marriage easily won over the company's executives. I was set to start next week with a very attractive salary. Elated, I stopped by the market planning to buy a nice piece of fish to cook a celebratory dinner for myself. As I reached the door of my apartment, I froze. A strange man was waiting for me. He wore a cheap black suit and thick-rimmed glasses, and he clutched a worn-out briefcase. His gaunt face and sharp eyes made me uneasy. Seeing me approach, he immediately put on a business smile and spoke first. "Miss Emma Davis, I presume. My name is Keith, and I'm the lead counsel for Titan Financial Services. I believe you know why I'm here. It took some doing to find your new address." My heart pounded, but I maintained a calm and cool exterior. Without opening my door, I crossed my arms in the hallway and looked him straight in the eye. "Hello. I don't owe Titan Financial any money. If you're looking for my ex-husband Daniel Vance, you have the wrong address. We are officially divorced. I have no connection to him or his family's debts." The man named Keith adjusted his glasses and spoke in a tone designed to manipulate. "Miss Kim, I understand you're divorced, but according to our records, most of Mrs. Eleanor Vance's debt was incurred during your marriage. And you know how it is, even a day, as a married couple builds a certain bond. Mr. Vance has currently defaulted and is on the run. You, Miss Kim, have a stable job. For the sake of your reputation and basic human decency, wouldn't it be right to help your ex-husband out? If you're willing to cover the debt, we can consider reducing the interest. If not, and this gets messy, it could become known at your new workplace. It would be difficult for you to show your face." I burst out laughing. It was a laugh of ridicule at the audacity of a debt collector disguised as a lawyer. He was trying to trap a penniless woman into paying off the debt of the man who betrayed her using the bait of decency and reputation. It was truly laughable. "Mr. Keith, since you deal with the law, let's stick to the law. Don't try to threaten me with appeals to sentiment or social norms. First, that debt was taken out in Eleanor Vance's personal name for her personal purposes, not for our household expenses. Second, according to the court-approved divorce decree, Daniel Vance voluntarily assumed responsibility for repaying all of that debt. It's written in black and white. Legally, I am completely in the clear and have zero obligation to repay your company's debt." My logic was so solid that the lawyer's demeanor changed. His voice became harsh and threatening. "Don't give me that legal mumbo-jumbo. The law is the law, but society works in its own way. We have plenty of methods to collect our debts. Don't think you can sleep soundly just because you have a piece of paper. If you don't cooperate, don't blame us for using more aggressive tactics." My eyes turned cold. I took a step closer and spoke clearly, right in the face of the man trying to intimidate me. "Listen carefully. I am a law-abiding citizen. If any action by your company harasses or threatens my private life, I will immediately report you to the nearest police precinct for attempted extortion and unlawful trespassing. There is a security camera in this hallway. I suggest you leave now and go find the person who actually borrowed the money. I need to rest." My firm stance broke his nerve. The lawyer glanced nervously at the CCTV camera on the corner of the ceiling. He muttered a few curses under his breath, grabbed his briefcase, and hurried down the stairs. Only after his figure had completely disappeared did I let out a sigh of relief. A cold sweat ran down my back. I knew this wasn't over. The Vance family had created too big a mess, and corporate debt collectors don't give up easily. The fact that this lawyer had found my studio meant Daniel had given them my information, hoping to use me as a scapegoat. Once inside my apartment, I locked the door firmly and made my first call to Mr. Miller, the lawyer who had represented me in the divorce. "Mr. Miller, hello. I'm sorry to call at this hour, but a debt collection agency just tracked me down to my home and threatened me. As of today, I want to formally retain your firm for all legal matters related to my ex-husband's family debt." From now on, if anyone harasses me, I will tell them to speak directly with my lawyer. Mr. Miller's calm, professional voice on the other end was reassuring. He took the case and advised me on how to collect evidence if I was threatened again. After hanging up, I leaned against my door and stared with a steely gaze at the darkening sky outside. The storm was getting closer, but I had more than enough weapons and shields. I would not let anyone trample on the peaceful life I had reclaimed with my own blood and tears. Life at the new media company was peaceful and busy. A constant stream of design projects kept me from dwelling on the dark corners of my recent marriage. My new colleagues were very kind. They judged me solely on my professional abilities with no interest in my past. That Friday, I received my first paycheck and was planning to buy a few new outfits when a call from an unfamiliar landline number ruined everything. The person on the other end introduced himself as a legal liaison from the Queens Community Mediation Center, the district where my ex-in-laws resided. In a calm voice, he requested my presence at the center's mediation room the following Monday morning. The reason Eleanor Vance had filed a formal complaint against me for severe violation of family ethics. In her complaint, she had tearfully claimed I was a disrespectful, abusive daughter-in-law. She alleged that I had upset her so badly that her heart condition had flared up, leaving her bedridden for days. Her demands were utterly absurd. She wanted me to pay all her medical bills, compensate her for emotional distress, and most importantly, continue paying her the $8,000 monthly allowance as before, so she could recover in peace. After hanging up, I sat stunned in my office chair for a long time. Disgust rose in my throat. I had never imagined human greed and shamelessness could be so bottomless. She was sitting on a mountain of debt. Her family was on the brink of collapse because of her avarice. Yet she still had the nerve to stage this pathetic drama, to squeeze the last remaining pennies from her divorced daughter-in-law, but the anger was fleeting, replaced by cold reason. I knew that backing down now would be digging my own grave. On Saturday morning, I went to Mr. Miller's office, with all the relevant evidence documents, messages, and audio files. The office filled with natural light and neatly organized law books gave me a sense of absolute security. Mr. Miller carefully reviewed the medical records I had obtained through a friend at the hospital and compared them with the electronic receipts I had happened to find in the Vance family's shared email account before I moved out. He adjusted his glasses and looked at me with admiration, praising my thorough preparation and foresight. He explained in detail that the Community Mediation Center, without a court order, had no authority to force anyone to pay money or compensation. This mediation was purely civil, a forum to encourage a settlement between two parties. However, Eleanor was trying to manipulate me by leveraging the pressure of local officials and the traditional moral views of the older community leaders. Her plan was to publicly shame me in front of influential neighborhood figures, hoping I would pay up out of embarrassment. We spent the entire morning devising a perfect counter-strategy. Mr. Miller coached me on how to control my emotions when faced with her crocodile tears. He stressed that I must not lose my composure, resort to insults, or raise my voice, as that would only alienate the mediators. My only and most powerful weapon was the truth proven in black and white. The night before the mediation, I laid out a neat professional suit and double-checked each stack of documents, organizing them chronologically in a black briefcase. Looking at myself in the mirror, I saw a completely different Emma Davis. The timid daughter-in-law who always bowed her head to her mother-in-law's unjust scolding was gone. The Emma of today was an independent, assertive woman ready to demolish anyone who tried to trample her dignity under the guise of hypocritical morals. I went to bed early in top condition for the battle ahead. This play was started by Eleanor, but I would be the one to bring down the curtain. Monday morning at 8 a.m. sharp, I walked into the community center with Mr. Miller. The mediation room was on the second floor, a sizable space with a large oval-shaped particle board table. When we entered the actors, my ex-in-laws were already seated on the opposite side. Eleanor was slumped in her chair, her face powdered a ghostly white with a pain relief patch on her forehead. She wore a drab brown outfit, deliberately trying to look like a frail, pathetic old woman. Beside her, Jessica stood with a worried expression, constantly rubbing her mother's back and dabbing ointment on her temples. Across from them sat a stern-faced community board member and a female staffer ready to take notes. As soon as she saw me, Eleanor began to cough violently. The dry, theatrical sound echoed in the quiet room. The board member cleared his throat and signaled for everyone to be seated. He began the meeting with a long speech about family traditions, neighborly harmony, and a child's duty. Then he asked Eleanor to state her complaint. On cue, Eleanor burst into tears. Tears streamed from her wrinkled eyes, her trembling voice creating a truly pathetic scene. She launched into a lengthy tirade about what a cold-hearted daughter-in-law I was. She claimed I had hidden money and sent it to my own family, and that the moment my in-laws faced some difficulty, I had coldly divorced my husband and abandoned my sick mother-in-law. She even loudly accused me of verbally abusing her over the phone, claiming the shock had caused her blood pressure to skyrocket and sent her to the emergency room for days. Finishing her tear-soaked performance, she pointed a finger at me and demanded that the community center right the wrongs done to her, make me pay her medical bills, and force me to continue her allowance. The female staffer clucked her tongue and shot me a reproachful look. The board member, in a stern tone, demanded that I explain myself regarding the immoral behavior Eleanor had just described. I stood up, calmly and politely, greeted everyone in the room. I slowly opened my briefcase and took out the first set of documents neatly organized in a clear plastic sleeve. Mr. Chairman, Madam Secretary, I fully understand and respect the principles of decency this center seeks to uphold. However, every accusation requires proof. Mrs. Vance claims I angered her so much that her heart condition relapsed, and she was rushed to the ER. I would like to submit to the committee the official diagnostic records from the very hospital where Mrs. Vance was admitted on that day. I placed a copy of the diagnostic report stamped with the hospital's red seal on the table, directly in front of the board member. He picked it up and scanned it, his brow furrowing. I read the key findings aloud for everyone to hear. Patient was admitted for abdominal pain and dizziness. Final diagnosis by a gastroenterologist is acute indigestion due to excessive consumption of high-protein and fatty foods, specifically overconsumption of raw seafood. Additionally, signs of hyperlipidemia and mild hypertension due to excessive fat intake. No signs of cardiac distress or physical debilitation due to mental shock were found. The entire room froze. Eleanor's sobbing stopped abruptly. The patch on her forehead looked like it was about to fall off. Jessica, flustered, put down the ointment bottle and averted her gaze. I didn't stop there. I took out a second stack of documents. Mrs. Vance also claimed she has been bedridden for days and that the family is in such dire straits they can't afford medicine. Mr. Chairman, these are copies of the family's credit card statements. On Tuesday, the day after she was discharged from the hospital, Mrs. Vance received a $1,500 24-karat gold facial treatment at a high-end spa on the Upper East Side. The next day, she used her card to purchase nearly $2,000 worth of premium imported health supplements at a department store. Does a person who just had a near-death experience and was supposedly fleeced by her daughter-in-law have the energy and money for such expensive treatments and lavish shopping? The board member, realizing he had been played by the old woman's lies, slammed the documents on the table in anger. His face turned beet red. The female staffer shook her head. Her reproachful gaze now turned into one of contempt for Eleanor. The greedy mother-in-law's victim-playing charade was brutally stripped away by the light of truth. Eleanor's mouth hung open, her face ashen. Now she looked like she might genuinely have a heart attack, no makeup needed. A suffocating silence filled the room. The board member with a stern face turned to Eleanor and spoke with authority, sharply criticizing her for deceiving an administrative body and abusing its trust by feigning a health condition to slander another citizen. Eleanor bowed her head low, her hands clenched and trembling. Her usual arrogance had vanished. Jessica anxiously kept texting someone on her phone. Just as the board member was about to dismiss the complaint and conclude the mediation, the door flew open with a bang. Everyone turned in surprise. Standing in the doorway was Daniel. The image of the dapper marketing director, always in an expensive suit with his hair perfectly styled, was gone. In his place stood a pathetic, wretched man. His hair was a mess, his shirt was wrinkled with 2 buttons undone, revealing a sweat-soaked chest. His eyes were bloodshot, and he was panting like a cornered animal. The moment he saw me, he lunged forward, heedless of the public officials in the room. "Emma, you vicious witch. What the hell have you done? Are you trying to kill me and Amber?" The board member shot up, banging the table and yelling at Daniel to be quiet and maintain order. But Daniel, seemingly having lost all reason, ignored the official's warning and continued to point a finger at me and scream. A dozen loan sharks showed up at Amber's office and dumped trash all over the entrance. They were shouting my name and her name through a megaphone for the whole neighborhood to hear. The company fired her on the spot for damaging their image, and my boss called me in and suspended me until this debt issue is resolved. Are you satisfied now? Does it feel good to drive us to our deaths? Take back this damn debt now. Looking at the crazed man who was once my husband, I felt no fear, no pity. Only contempt for his foolishness and cowardice. He had acted so boldly when committing his betrayals, but now that the consequences had arrived, he was trying to shift the blame onto the woman he had wronged. I signaled for Mr. Miller to remain seated and took a step forward myself to confront Daniel. I pulled a thick file from my briefcase and slammed it onto the table. The dry thud made Daniel flinch. "Daniel Vance, open your eyes and look closely. This is a record of every dollar I sent to your mother over the last 5 years while I scrimped and saved. Nearly $600,000. My blood and sweat paid for your mother's luxurious lifestyle and put food on this family's table. And you. You used our joint assets to buy designer bags for your mistress, Amber. While I was working late nights at the office, you brought her into our marital bed. You and your mother conspired to kick me out with nothing so you could live your life freely." I took a deep breath, my voice becoming as sharp as a razor. "Now that karma has come knocking and the creditors are at your door, you have the audacity to come here and demand I pay your debts. That $40 million debt was created by your mother, and you are the one who voluntarily signed a document in front of a judge agreeing to assume full responsibility for its repayment. The court's seal is on that document. What right, what authority do you have to demand that I take responsibility for the consequences of your family's greed and depravity? Let me make this crystal clear. From this moment on, if you or anyone in your family comes near me or harasses me in any way, I will immediately file for a restraining order and press charges for harassment and making terroristic threats." The board member and the staffer heard every word. They looked at Daniel with disgust. The board member walked over, pointed to the door, and loudly ordered Daniel and his family to leave the community center immediately. The mediation ended in a humiliating defeat for my former in-laws. I smiled and thanked the officials, and Mr. Miller then walked out of that suffocating room with my head held high. Behind me, I could hear Eleanor's shrill curses as she berated her foolish son. The fight at the community center completely shattered the last of the Vance family's delusions that I would be their scapegoat. A week passed peacefully, and I thought everything was finally over. I started redecorating my small studio, placing a few small plants by the window and cooking delicious meals for myself. But the ripples from that rotten family's actions were far from settled. One evening during the week, a torrential rain poured down. I had just finished dinner when a frantic loud knocking echoed from my door. Peeking through the window, I was shocked to see who was standing under the meager awning of the apartment building. It was Amber Lynn, the little mistress Daniel had tried so hard to protect. She looked nothing like the chic young woman I had seen in their secretly snapped dating photos, always carrying a Dior bag with bright red lipstick. The Amber before me now was as pathetic as Daniel had been a few days ago. She was soaked to the bone, her hair plastered to her pale, makeup-free face. Her expensive designer dress was stained with muddy water. The moment I opened the door, her legs seemed to give out and she collapsed onto the cold tile floor on her knees. "Emma, please, I'm begging you on my knees. Please save Daniel. If you don't, he'll rot in prison for the rest of his life." I took a step back, crossed my arms, and coldly looked down at the woman weeping at my feet. I had no intention of letting her in or helping her up. "Miss Lynn, you've come to the wrong person. I'm not the police, and I'm not a savior. Whatever happened to your boyfriend, you deal with it. Don't bring your problems to me." Amber shook her head, violently clutching the doorframe. Tears and snot streamed down her face. In a voice cracking with fear, she began to spill the story. Through her panicked confession, I finally understood the full gravity of the disaster the Vance family had created. It was far beyond a simple civil debt default. It turned out that the investment firm Eleanor had poured her life savings into was not just a pyramid scheme but a massive financial fraud ring that had recently been busted by the FBI. Eleanor was not just a victim. Blinded by commission fees, she had become a key player roping in elderly people from her hometown and naive relatives. But the worst part was Daniel's involvement. To help his mother secure massive loans from financial institutions and illegal lenders, he, as an experienced marketing director, had abused his professional skills. He had forged his company's official seal and fabricated income statements to create a perfect set of loan application documents for Eleanor. Just this afternoon, the Economic Crimes Unit had raided their home and arrested Daniel on charges of forgery of official documents and conspiracy to commit fraud. "Emma, they took Daniel away," she sobbed. "The police said his crimes are very serious, involving millions of dollars." Mrs. Vance collapsed when she heard the news and is in the ER right now. I have nowhere to turn. The loan sharks are after me, trying to take the condo we bought on installments. Amber looked up at me with bloodshot eyes and made a suggestion so repulsive it made me want to vomit. Please, Emma, go to the police station and help us. Can't you just say that you handled all the finances during the marriage and you pressured him into forging the documents because of money problems? Or maybe you could take on some of the responsibility to reduce his sentence. You have experience with accounting. You know how to get around the law. I promise when Daniel gets out, we'll spend our whole lives paying you back. We'll treat you as our savior for life. I stood frozen for a few seconds. I couldn't believe a woman with such a twisted, vile mind could exist. She was asking me to commit perjury to take the fall for the man who betrayed me just to save her and that horrible man's future. The rain outside seemed to be getting heavier. Thunderclaps split the night sky. I stood a step above Amber, looking down at the top of her bowed head. All the injustice and pain of my 5 years of youth instantly transformed into an invisible force, making my mind clearer and sharper than ever before. I didn't get angry or shout. I spoke in a voice calm and firm enough to pierce through her selfish shell. Amber Lynn, look at me. Do I look like a fool who can be so easily manipulated by you people? I took a step back and pointed directly at her face. When you were secretly sleeping with a married man, embracing him in the marital bed, I worked so hard to furnish, did you ever think about basic human decency? When you were carrying expensive designer bags and going on lavish trips with money Daniel siphoned from our joint account, did you feel any guilt? You reaped the fruits of my labor, played the victor, and kicked me out onto the street with nothing. Now that your man is a criminal facing jail time, you drag your pathetic body here. Kneel at my feet and ask me to go to prison for him. Do you have any idea how disgusting and repulsive the words coming out of your mouth are? Amber bit her lip hard, her facial muscles tensed as my words hit their mark. She tried to defend herself with the lame excuses of a cornered person. But Emma, you loved him once. You don't have a family or any attachments. You can spend a few years in prison and start over. But me, I'm still young. I can't have my future ruined. If Daniel goes to jail, the loan sharks will kill me. I burst out laughing, a sound that drowned out the rain. The mistress's selfishness had reached a pathological level. That was your choice, Amber Lynn. You chose a parasitic life with a despicable man. You chose to find pleasure on top of someone else's pain. Now you have to pay the price for that choice. The law is fair. Those who do wrong get punished. I have no obligation and no reason to touch your pile of filth. Get away from my door now. Before I call the police and have you removed like the trash you are. When gentle pleading didn't work, Amber's trashy, shameless true nature was instantly revealed. She shot up and glared at me with eyes full of rage. Her fake tears were replaced by a murderous glint. If you won't listen to reason, you'll regret it. You think you're so clean. If you don't help me, I'll go to that media company you work for tomorrow. I'll tell your boss and your colleagues what a depraved, vicious woman you are, how you framed your ex-husband to send him to jail. I'll hire people to trash you on every social media platform. If I can't live in peace, don't you think for a second you'll be able to hold your head up in this city. Faced with her ferocity, I felt not a shred of fear. I calmly took my smartphone from my pocket and unlocked it. I opened a file in a hidden folder and held the screen right in front of her face. Amber Lynn, take a good look. These are screenshots of messages you sent to 3 other married men before you met Daniel. Conversations haggling over your price for a night. Seductive words to extort money. These were collected by a private investigator I hired when I first suspected Daniel's affair. Did you think I walked away empty-handed? Your parents are respected retired teachers in their hometown, aren't they? What do you think would happen if I printed all this evidence and mailed it to your parents' old school, the mayor of your town, and attached it to a company-wide email at the job you just got fired from? Who do you think won't be able to hold their head up in society then? The color drained from Amber's face, turning from red to paper white. Her earlier bravado deflated like a punctured balloon. She stumbled back a few steps, staring at the phone in my hand with the terrified eyes of someone who had just seen a demon. Her threat had hit an impenetrable steel wall. I kept quiet because I didn't want to get my hands dirty with someone like you. But if you open your mouth to threaten me one more time, I will show you what rock bottom really looks like. Now get out. Amber staggered backward, nearly slipping and falling down the stairs. Terrified, she turned and ran into the pitch-black rain, disappearing down the narrow alley without a backward glance. I calmly slammed the door shut and engaged all 3 locks. Outside, the storm raged against the guilty, but inside my small room it was still warm and peaceful. After that stormy night, after kicking the shameless mistress out the door, I thought I would have a few days of peace. With the police officially investigating and Daniel in custody, my former in-law's nest of vipers must have been in utter chaos. I told myself to just focus on work and stay out of all the drama, but I had underestimated the madness of a woman pushed to the edge. That night, the clock ticked past 2 a.m. The neighborhood was quiet 10 in the deep sleep of people weary from a long day. I was deep in a dream when a sharp clang startled me awake. The sound of metal striking the steel fire door was ear-splitting. At first I thought a drunk neighbor had mistaken their door, but then a sharp, eerie woman's voice cut through the night's silence. Emma Davis. You vicious witch, open this door right now. You think you can sleep peacefully after throwing my son in jail. If you have any guts, come out and face me. I'm going to end this with you tonight. It was Eleanor. Her voice, filled with venomous hatred, made every cell in my body tense up. The banging grew more frantic, accompanied by a torrent of curses, and the sound of what seemed like a crowbar striking the metal door. Open the door. If you don't, I'll set this place on fire and burn you alive. I have nothing left to live for, so don't think I'll let you live in peace. My son and I are at a dead end. My heart hammered against my ribs. A primal fear surged through me as I faced someone who had lost all reason. She was no longer the arrogant, domineering mother-in-law. She was a dangerous, cornered animal capable of anything for revenge. I silently got out of bed, careful not to turn on any lights that might provoke her further. I checked the 3 locks again, making sure the deadbolt was secure. I took out my phone, turned on the flashlight, and in video recording mode held the lens to a crack in the blinds. Under the dim streetlights of the alley, Eleanor was a terrifying sight. She was in disheveled pajamas, her hair covering half her face. In her hands she held a large crowbar which she repeatedly slammed against my door. At her feet was a plastic canister that reeked of gasoline. She was serious about setting a fire. Without a second's hesitation, I dialed 911, reporting the emergency to the rapid response team, and then immediately called the local precinct. I clearly and concisely gave my address and stated it was an emergency situation involving threats of murder and arson. The neighbors were waking up. A few windows opened cautiously, but seeing Eleanor's crazed state and the gasoline, no one dared to come out and intervene. Noticing she was being watched, she started screaming at the neighbors, threatening them to make me come out. In less than 5 minutes, the wail of a police siren cut through the night, and the flashing red and blue lights illuminated the old alley walls. 2 officers from the precinct and some neighborhood watch members arrived swiftly. Eleanor was subdued before she could react. The crowbar was sent flying, and the gasoline can was kicked away. She resisted violently, screaming like a madwoman, shouting my name and spewing the most vile curses. The officers eventually had to handcuff her and force her into the back of the patrol car. As the siren faded into the distance and peace returned to the neighborhood, I slowly opened my door. The landlady and a few neighbors rushed over to check on me. I bowed my head and apologized for disturbing their sleep briefly, explaining the situation to calm their nerves. Back in my room, I sank to the cold floor. I had prepared for the worst, but the depravity of that family still sent shivers down my spine. But at the same time, I felt a surge of steely resolve. The video on my phone and tonight's arrest record would be the final fitting punishment that would sever all ties between me and those who had lost their humanity. The next morning, I called my HR department and requested to come in 2 hours late due to a personal emergency. I took my phone containing the video of Eleanor trying to break down my door and threatening arson along with all my divorce-related documents, and headed to the police station. Mr. Miller was already waiting for me. His calm professional presence was always a rock for me when facing legal troubles. At the front desk, the officer on duty briefed me on the situation from last night. Eleanor was booked on 2 serious charges, disturbing the peace and threatening the life and property of another. Because she was found with a potential accelerant and a weapon, the matter was complicated. To clarify her motive, the police had decided to place her in temporary custody. Mr. Miller filed for a restraining order against Eleanor and her entire family. He also formally filed a civil suit seeking damages for defamation, harassment, and emotional distress she had caused. The evidence I provided was overwhelming and clear. The officer in charge quickly processed the paperwork and promised to handle the matter strictly according to the law. While waiting for the paperwork to be completed, I overheard a detective discussing the financial fraud case with a colleague. Daniel's name was mentioned several times. It turned out my ex-husband's situation in the detention center was even more pathetic than I had imagined. Daniel, accustomed to living comfortably off other people's money, had completely broken down when faced with the 4 cold walls of a cell. The officer said that during the first interrogation, Daniel had wept like a child. His usual arrogant intellectual facade was gone, replaced by the cowardly finger-pointing of a cornered man. He claimed his mother had forced him into everything. He said Eleanor, blinded by greed for commissions, had pushed him down the path of forgery. He refused to accept any responsibility for his actions. Not content with throwing his mother under the bus, he also viciously cursed his mistress, Amber Lynn. He told the investigators that Amber was the root of all evil, a gold digger who had seduced him into leaving his wife, ultimately bringing ruin upon his family. He had been begging to see me, hoping that if I covered some of the damages, he might get a reduced sentence. Hearing this, I could only shake my head. A despicable, irresponsible man to the very end. When times were good, he trampled on his loyal wife and embraced his mistress. When trouble hit, he pushed his own mother toward ruin, cursed his lover, and begged his ex-wife for salvation. That man no longer deserved even a second of space in my mind. As I walked out of the police station, the morning sun of a new day shone directly on my face. It was warm and dazzling. Mr. Miller gave my shoulder a light pat and an encouraging smile. He assured me that with the restraining order and the full force of the law, that family would have no more chances to interfere in my life. I sincerely thanked my dedicated lawyer and caught a cab straight to the office. The dark cloud of my past had truly dissipated. I took a deep breath of the crisp autumn air and walked into my office with a completely renewed spirit to start my day. Nearly a month passed after that chaotic night. My life gradually settled into a stable rhythm. My work at the media company was going very well. I received high praise from the board and was officially promoted to design team lead earlier than expected. My new colleagues were passionate and open-minded, creating a professional environment where I could completely immerse myself in my work, free from the pain of my divorce. On weekends, instead of cooping myself up in my studio, I joined a hiking club to get some exercise and expand my social circle. It was there that I met Ethan. He was an engineer at a multinational tech company. Ethan wasn't flashy or polished like Daniel, but he had a rugged, warm charm. His small gestures, like carrying my heavy backpack or handing me a bottle of cool water just when I was getting tired, strangely put me at ease. We became good friends, often texting about work and life. One Friday afternoon, I was sitting in a cafe with Ethan, discussing our upcoming hiking trip. My phone rang, and an unfamiliar number appeared on the screen. Wary, I excused myself from Ethan and went to a quiet corner of the cafe to take the call. "Hello," there was a few seconds of silence, then a heavy, raspy male voice spoke. "Emma, it's me." "Daniel." A chill ran down my spine and my muscles tensed. I gripped my phone tightly, my mind racing to analyze the situation. Daniel was supposed to be in a detention center, awaiting trial. How could he be calling me? What is it? Daniel's voice was thick with a feigned sorrow, a desperate attempt to appeal to any lingering sentiment. "My family posted bail. I'm out waiting for the trial. I got a medical release for acute gastritis." "Emma." I did a lot of thinking in there. I was wrong. I'm sorry, 1,000 times sorry. Losing you was the biggest mistake of my life. Amber disappeared without a trace, and my mother is in a psychiatric facility. I've lost everything. Can we please meet just for a little while this afternoon? I want to apologize in person. I frowned rapidly, analyzing every word, every nuance in his voice. On the surface, it was a desperate plea, but I detected a subtle, resentful tremor at the end of his sentences. A selfish and cowardly man like Daniel would never suddenly see the light and admit his faults. His release on bail was a dangerous variable, and his attempt to approach me surely concealed some dark scheme. "Daniel, I think there's nothing left for us to talk about. The court has made its decision, and the law is taking its course. Save your apologies for the courtroom. The restraining order is still in effect. If you deliberately try to find me, I will immediately report you to the police and have your bail revoked. Goodbye." I hung up decisively, giving him no chance to say more. I immediately texted Mr. Miller to inform him of the situation. He replied quickly, urging me not to meet Daniel under any circumstances, to avoid walking alone at night, and to keep my phone on and reachable at all times. When I returned to the table, Ethan noticed my pale complexion and asked with concern. I just forced a smile and said it was a spam call. I wasn't ready to tell Ethan the complicated story of my past. I was afraid its filth would taint the purity of the connection we were just beginning to build. I reassured myself that the law would protect me, but deep down I had a premonition that the final storm named Daniel was quietly approaching. As the year-end approached, work became increasingly hectic. A series of holiday design projects often kept me working late into the night. It was a weekday, and a biting northwesterly wind had plunged the city streets into a bone-chilling cold. I finished the last design, shut down my computer, put on my coat, and left the office. The clock already showed 9 p.m. The streets were deserted. I started walking toward the bus stop about a quarter-mile from my office. The dim yellow glow of the streetlights cast a lonely light on the damp asphalt. There was no one at the bus stop. I pulled my collar tighter and waited for the last bus, staring out at the empty street. Suddenly, a black cargo van with its headlights off pulled up and stopped right next to the curb, less than 6 feet from where I stood. A woman's instinct for self-preservation kicked in. I took a few steps back, my hand slipping into my coat pocket to grip the small can of pepper spray I always carried. The van's side door slid open abruptly. 2 burly men in black hoodies, their faces obscured by hats and masks, jumped out like ghosts. They made a beeline for me. "Grab her, get her in the van, quick," one of them growled. Everything happened in an instant. The man in front reached out to grab my collar. I dodged sideways on pure survival instinct, pulled out the pepper spray, and shot a stream directly into his face. He screamed in agony, clutching his eyes and stumbling back, but the second man was already on me from behind. He wrapped an arm like a steel band around my neck and tried to cover my mouth with his other hand to stop me from screaming. The feeling of suffocation and the foul stench of stale cigarette smoke from his body overwhelmed me. I struggled violently, swinging my heavy purse with its metal buckles and repeatedly hitting his head and shoulders. I screamed with all my remaining strength, "Help, kidnapping! Help me!" The man cursed and started dragging me toward the open van door. During the struggle, the heel of my shoe caught on the edge of the curb and my ankle twisted violently. A searing pain shot from my ankle to my brain. I collapsed, but I desperately clung to the metal pole of the bus stop sign, refusing to let go. At that very moment of life and death, the bright headlights of a police car on its nightly patrol shone directly on the bus stop. Its distinctive siren blared. The patrol team, having spotted the struggle, immediately accelerated toward us. "Cops, let her go, let's get out of here," the man in the driver's seat of the van yelled urgently. The man choking me yelped in surprise, hastily let go, and shoved me roughly to the ground. The 2 masked men scrambled back into the van and slammed the door shut. The van screeched as it mounted the curb and then sped off into the darkness. I lay on the cold pavement, clutching my swelling ankle, gasping for breath in terror. 2 police officers quickly got out of their car. One rushed to help me up, while the other radioed headquarters reporting a kidnapping in progress, giving descriptions of the assailants and the vehicle's license plate, and requesting all roads be blocked. I was taken in the police car to the nearest hospital to have my injuries treated and to give an initial statement. It was a terrifying nightmare that had crossed the line from harassment to life-threatening danger. The ankle injury, thankfully, was just a severe sprain. The doctor fitted me with a brace and prescribed painkillers. That night, I was taken to the detectives' division at the police station. My body was in extreme pain and exhausted, but my mind was unnaturally clear. I gave a detailed account of the incident, the history of threats from Daniel's family, and especially his phone call from last Friday. As they say, the arm of the law is long. Despite the culprits having partially covered the license plate with tape, the city's extensive network of CCTV cameras quickly tracked their movements. A joint operation between the detective squad and SWAT teams blocked the roads, and they apprehended all 3 suspects on an outer beltway as they tried to flee the city. The next morning, before the city had woken up, the horrifying truth behind the attempted kidnapping was revealed through the suspects' confessions. They were hired thugs from an outlying borough. The man who had hired them was a former cellmate of Daniel's, a man named Spike. Consumed with rage at me for publicly shaming him with the evidence and desperate over the $40 million debt, Daniel had come up with a demented plan. He sold his last remaining luxury watch for $20,000 and paid Spike to have me abducted. Daniel's plan was exceptionally cruel. He wanted them to take me to a remote warehouse and, through violence and psychological torture, force me to record a video confessing to all sorts of wrongdoing. He then planned to force me to sign a pre-written fraudulent document in which I would voluntarily assume the $40 million debt in exchange for my life. Reading the summary of the confession handed to me by the investigator, I felt a chill that went straight to my bones. The man I had shared a bed with for 5 years had become such a vicious monster. He had lost all humanity left, with only the instincts of a cornered beast. With a full confession and physical evidence, a special investigation team was immediately dispatched to Daniel's temporary residence. They kicked in the door and arrested Daniel on the spot as he was packing a bag to flee. This time there would be no more leniency. He was arrested, and the cold steel of handcuffs locked around his wrists, putting a definitive end to his short-lived freedom. In addition to violating the terms of his bail, he now faced extremely serious felony charges for conspiracy to commit kidnapping for the purpose of extortion and assault. One crime had bred another. I sat in the waiting room of the police station feeling the first rays of dawn through the window. The pain in my ankle was still there, but the invisible weight that had been pressing on my heart for months had finally lifted. Evil is punished by evil. All of Daniel's vile schemes had crumbled under the judgment of the law. I knew then that I was truly safe. The sky outside was clearer than ever, and my life was greeting its most brilliant dawn. Due to my ankle injury, I had to take a few days off work and rest at home. During this time, I mostly stayed confined to my studio. To recover from the shock of the terrifying attempted kidnapping, I turned off all my social media notifications. Daniel's case was being swiftly investigated by the police and was set to be handed over to the prosecutor's office with a recommendation for indictment. I thought the noisy days were finally on pause. That was until one late afternoon when I received another call from the police station. The detective in charge of the case asked me to come to the station urgently to confirm some new developments. I had a bad feeling it was related to the remaining dregs of the Vance family. Gritting my teeth against the pain, I took a cab to the station. In an office lit by cold fluorescent lights, the officer placed a copy of a letter in front of me. It was written in a shaky hand with blue ink. On the top left corner of the paper was a yellowish stain that looked like a teardrop. In a calm voice, the officer delivered another piece of shocking news. Yesterday afternoon, after being evicted from the condo she had bought on installments, Amber Lynn had taken a large quantity of sleeping pills in the shabby studio she had just rented. Fortunately, the landlady who had come to collect the rent grew suspicious when there was no answer to her knocking. She had people break down the door, and they rushed Amber to the hospital to have her stomach pumped. She was now out of critical condition but was under close observation. The letter on the desk was the suicide note Amber had left behind, and most of its contents were aimed at me. The officer explained that because the note contained accusations that I had mentally abused her and pushed her to a dead end, he needed me to read it carefully and give my statement. I picked up the paper and scanned the words filled with blind hatred. Amber wrote that her life had become so miserable entirely because of my vicious and merciless actions. She accused me of heartlessly publishing all the evidence on social media, causing her to lose her job and reputation. She resented me for cruelly sending Daniel to jail, which made her lose her only pillar of support when the loan sharks came after her. The letter ended with a curse saying her death would be a weight on my conscience for the rest of my life. After reading the note, I felt no fear or guilt. Only pity and contempt for a woman with such a parasitic mindset. I gently placed the paper back on the desk and looked up, meeting the investigator's eyes directly. My demeanor was one of absolute composure of someone who firmly understands right, wrong, and the law. Detective, I've read it. Let me state again clearly that I bear no legal or moral responsibility for Miss Lynn's impulsive actions. This suicide note is nothing more than a final excuse from someone who lacks the courage to face the consequences of her own choices. The officer nodded slightly, signaling me to continue. I broke down her baseless accusations point by point to dismantle them completely. First, the reason Amber Lynn lost her reputation and job was not because I harmed her. It was the inevitable consequence of her destroying another person's family and committing a serious moral transgression. Second, the person who sent Daniel Vance to prison was his own mother's greed and his own depravity in participating in fraud and forgery. I am the victim in this situation, abandoned, robbed of our joint assets, and nearly killed by thugs he hired. I was simply exercising my legal right to self-defense to protect my reputation and my safety. Miss Lynn's suicide attempt is a personal tragedy stemming from her inability to handle the pressure from her creditors, not from any coercion or threats from me. The investigator meticulously recorded my statement. He explained that because my name was mentioned in the note, he had to call me in to gather objective information as a matter of procedure. He also said the police had already confirmed that the primary cause of Amber's extreme actions was the harsh pressure from the financial creditors. The law is always fair and transparent. No one can use death to extort money from or frame an innocent person. I signed the statement and left the police station as the city lights were beginning to turn on. The cold wind on my face cleared my head even more. The mistress's suicide note was like a pebble tossed into a calm lake. It would cause a momentary ripple and then sink to the bottom. I promised myself then and there that kindness must be used in the right places. For those who use feigned weakness to manipulate others, a cold refusal is the most humane response. As I took a cab back to my small studio, I completely closed the sad chapter named Amber Lynn in my life. Time flew by in the blink of an eye. The harsh winter passed and the warm spring sun arrived. My leg had fully recovered. My job at the media company provided a stable income and a proud position. The issues related to my ex-in-laws were left to the judgment of the law, seemingly fading into distant memories. That morning, I took a day off to attend the first instance sentencing in the criminal trial involving Daniel and the financial fraud ring. The courtroom at the federal courthouse was solemn. The public gallery was filled with victims who had lost their life savings to the scam. I quietly took a seat in a back corner to observe. The sound of a transport vehicle's siren wailed outside. The bailiffs led the defendants into the courtroom. When I saw Daniel, I almost didn't recognize the man I had once shared a life with. He was gaunt, his cheeks sunken, and his shaved head revealed a terrified face. He was wearing a prison jumpsuit. He kept his head bowed low, his hands clenched and trembling under the furious glares of the dozens of victims seated below. The arrogant, hypocritical image of the dapper marketing director was completely gone, replaced by the pathetic figure of a criminal awaiting judgment. The trial proceeded under tense conditions all day. The prosecutor read out the charges one by one, accompanied by irrefutable evidence. Daniel was charged with multiple serious crimes, simultaneously forgery of official documents and seals to aid his mother's fraud and embezzlement, and as the mastermind of the plot to kidnap and extort me, charges of assault, disturbing public order. Faced with the clear evidence of the thug's testimony and CCTV footage, Daniel could deny nothing. He could only weep and beg the court for leniency. Eleanor's fate was equally tragic. According to the investigation report presented in court, the mental shock of losing her entire fortune and witnessing her son go to prison had caused Eleanor to exhibit severe symptoms of paranoid delusional disorder. A psychiatric evaluation confirmed she had lost the capacity for cognitive and behavioral control. Consequently, the prosecution suspended the criminal investigation against her and ordered her to be committed for psychiatric treatment. Even the loan sharks had to swallow their losses and drop their lawsuits as the family was completely bankrupt with no assets to seize. Late that afternoon, the judge sentenced Daniel to a total of 15 years in prison for all his crimes. The dry crack of the gavel striking the sound block put a full stop to the life of a man who had trampled on morality and the law. A sigh of relief and applause erupted from the victims in the gallery. I stood up quietly and left the courtroom before the bailiffs escorted Daniel to the transport vehicle. I felt no triumph, no pity. In my heart, there was only a sense of profound finality. Justice had been served. Karma had delivered its precise verdict to those who had sown disaster. That evening, I sat at the desk in my studio. I turned on my laptop and accessed the hidden folder named Evidence. It contained all the audio files, message screenshots, and bank transfer records, the blood and sweat of my 5 years of marriage. I selected the entire folder with my mouse and decisively clicked the permanently delete button. The progress bar reached 100%. The last piece of data connecting me to that rotten family was gone. The ringing of my phone broke my train of thought. It was Ethan. His warm voice through the speaker brought a strange sense of peace. He asked if I had eaten dinner and suggested we go for a walk over the weekend. I smiled. A genuine, bright smile that came from deep within my heart. Without hesitation, I said, yes. The dark past was firmly shut behind me. I was ready to embrace the good feelings and sincerity that Ethan brought into my life. A year after the trial, my life had put on a vibrant and lively new dress. Ethan and I officially started dating. Our love wasn't loud or flashy for social media. It blossomed in the quiet understanding and care we showed in small, everyday actions. Ethan was mature, a great listener, and always respected my personal space. With a steady promotion, a year-end project bonus, and a bank loan added to my savings, I managed to buy a small, cozy apartment in a nice part of Brooklyn on an installment plan. The dream of owning my own true sanctuary had finally become a reality. That weekend, Ethan took me to a modern art exhibition at a city museum. The gallery was quiet, filled with soft yellow lighting and gentle classical music. I linked my arm through Ethan's, slowly admiring the large paintings one by one, completely absorbed in the beautiful colors. A sense of happiness permeated every breath I took. I thought those stormy days were forever buried under the dust of time. But fate, it seems, likes to test people when they are at their most peaceful. As I was lost in a still life painting, my phone in my purse began to vibrate continuously. The name, Mr. Miller, appeared on the screen. Since Daniel's case, Mr. Miller only occasionally sent messages to check in. He rarely called on a weekend. Thereversen, sensing it was important, I excused myself from Ethan and stepped out into an empty hallway to take the call. "Hello, Mr. Miller." On the other end, Mr. Miller's voice was urgent and slightly out of breath. Emma listened calmly. "The situation is very critical. Eleanor Vance just escaped from the social welfare facility." My ears roared, and a cold chill ran down my spine. I gripped my phone tightly and in the calmest voice I could manage asked for details. "How is that possible?" The court ordered her into treatment. "Wasn't she committed to a state psychiatric hospital?" Mr. Miller explained quickly. "After Daniel went to prison, Jessica, hounded by creditors, lost her condo and was forced into a shabby studio apartment. Unable to afford the high costs of the state psychiatric hospital, Jessica had signed a guarantee to take personal care of her mother. Got her discharged, and then, to shirk responsibility, had secretly abandoned her at a homeless shelter in an outlying area. This morning during a staff shift change, Eleanor had apparently climbed over a back wall behind the kitchen and escaped. The most terrifying part was that the staff had found a photograph under her bed, a picture of me from when I was married. My face in the photo was viciously scribbled over with a red pen. Several residents who shared her room testified that for the past few days, she had been sitting in a dark corner at night, not sleeping, muttering to herself, constantly mentioning my name and vowing to get revenge. Mr. Miller's tone was extremely serious as he urged me. "I've already reported it to the police and requested a search. But a delusional psychiatric patient with a vendetta is unpredictable. Where are you now? You need to go somewhere safe immediately, a place with good security. Do not go back to your old studio or walk the streets alone." After hanging up, my whole body trembled uncontrollably. The terror of the past resurfaced, squeezing my heart. The image of my crazed mother-in-law breaking down my door with a crowbar, holding a gasoline can and threatening to burn my house down, flashed vividly in my mind. I leaned against the marble wall of the museum, the air around me feeling suffocatingly heavy. The beautiful landscape painting in front of me blurred, replaced by an overwhelming fear of the danger lurking in the darkness. I stood frozen in the museum hallway, my palms soaked with cold sweat. Just as I was on the verge of a full-blown panic attack, a warm, steady hand gently rested on my shoulder. I jumped, startled, and spun around. It was Ethan. He had immediately noticed the drastic change in my expression and was looking at me with worried eyes. "Emma, what's wrong? Is everything okay? You look terrible." Who was that on the phone? Looking into Ethan's sincere eyes, the facade of strength I had so carefully built shattered in an instant. I didn't want to hide anything from him anymore. Even knowing he might leave me out of fear, I wanted to tell him everything. I took a deep breath, and in a trembling voice, briefly told him about the call with Mr. Miller and the threat from my mentally ill ex-mother-in-law. After hearing the story, Ethan didn't look shocked or blame me in the slightest. His face hardened, showing the resolve of a man determined to protect the woman he loves. He didn't ask any more questions about my past. He just took my hand firmly and led me quickly toward the museum exit. "We're leaving right now. Don't even think about going to your old studio to get things, and your new apartment's security system isn't fully installed yet, so it's not safe. You're coming to my place. My building has triple-layered security. No one without a key fob can get in. Just stay with me." Ethan's decisiveness strangely calmed my frayed nerves. During the car ride, I sat huddled in the passenger seat, silently watching the traffic go by. When we arrived at his high-rise apartment, he carefully locked the front door, drew the balcony curtains, and handed me a glass of warm water. Sitting on the plush sofa in the absolute safety of his home, I began to open up. I summoned the courage to tell him everything. The 5 years of humiliating marriage, my mother-in-law's exploitation, Daniel's callous betrayal, the $40 million debt from the investment scam, and the night I was nearly kidnapped by thugs. I cried as I spoke. The tears I had suppressed for so long flowed uncontrollably. I was terrified that after hearing such a dark and complicated past, Ethan would see me as a burden and distance himself. But Ethan didn't pass any judgment. He just listened quietly. When I finished, he moved closer and gently wiped the tears from my cheeks. He pulled me into a tight embrace. It was a hug that radiated warmth and strength. "Emma," he said softly, "you've been through so much. From now on, you don't have to fight alone. I'll block every storm at the door. You just need to be happy and peaceful by my side. I will always be your shield against anyone who tries to hurt you." That night I fell asleep on the sofa, held safely in Ethan's arms. The next morning I was woken by the ringing of my phone. Mr. Miller delivered the news that finally allowed me to set down the heavy stone that had been weighing on my heart. A police patrol had found Eleanor in the early hours of the morning. She was wandering near a bus terminal, far from the city center, in a state of complete amnesia. Her clothes were caked with dirt and she was muttering incoherently. It seemed the starvation and exhaustion from a night on the run had pushed her mental illness into its final stage. The local precinct processed her and transferred her to a secure national psychiatric hospital, where she would be under strict legal supervision. The last threat, named ex-in-laws, had been officially neutralized. I smiled in relief, watching the brilliant morning sun pour through the windows of Ethan's apartment. Everything was truly, finally over. As time passed, all the old resentments were buried. The law of cause and effect had delivered a fitting fate to each member of that wicked family. Eleanor was forever confined within the four walls of the National Psychiatric Hospital, destined to live out her days in a state of mindless dementia. Jessica, who once flaunted designer goods and spent money like water, was battered by the winds of fortune. Unable to find a stable job and ostracized by relatives, she ended up working as a stocker at a large supermarket. She stands on her feet for over 10 hours a day for a meager salary, living a weary life in a rundown studio in an outer borough. The shameless mistress Amber Lynn, after her failed suicide attempt, was kicked out by her landlord. Her parents dragged her back to their hometown, where she was forced to repay the debts she had racked up from loan sharks. To finally settle the debt, her family married her off to a widower, 20 years her senior, from a neighboring village. Those who had sown the wind all reaped the whirlwind. For me, the brightest days of my youth felt like they were just beginning. My small apartment was finally decorated. Ethan designed the lighting system and gifted me all the new appliances. He meticulously installed a triple security system and a smart door lock to ensure I always felt safe. On the day I moved into my new home, the weather in the city was perfect. Ethan and I cleaned the house together, arranging small decorative items on the shelves. Though the apartment was less than 700 square feet, it was filled with sunlight, creating a very cozy space. That evening, I cooked a housewarming meal for Ethan. It wasn't a feast, but it included his favorite braised short ribs, a hearty stew, and a few simple side dishes. We sat across from each other at a small table by the floor-to-ceiling window. The city skyline at night was breathtakingly beautiful. The meal was filled with laughter, chasing away the newness of the home. After dinner, Ethan brought 2 cups of warm tea to the table. He looked at me with a very deep and serious gaze. Suddenly, he stood up, walked over to my side, and got down on one knee. He took a small red velvet box from his jacket pocket and opened it. A beautifully designed diamond ring glittered under the light. "Emma, watching you overcome all those storms on your own made me respect and love you even more. This home is beautiful, but it would be even more perfect with a man you can lean on whenever you're tired. Will you marry me? Give me the chance to take care of you for the rest of our lives." Tears streamed down my face, but this time they weren't tears of humiliation or fear. They were tears of overwhelming happiness. It was the moment all my pain, sacrifice, and the courage it took to rise from the mud was finally rewarded. I extended my trembling hand to him, smiled brightly, and nodded. Ethan carefully slipped the ring onto my finger, stood up, and pulled me into his arms. Together, we looked out the window at the bustling city below. I rested my head on his shoulder, took a deep breath, and felt a sense of complete peace. A brilliant, free, and love-filled new chapter was unfolding before me. In it, the weak and submissive Emma Davis was gone, and in her place stood a proud woman who had fought for and won her own life and happiness.